At Christmas brunch, she didn't even lower her voice. She just looked at me, rolled her eyes and said, "Don't walk with me. You'll embarrass me in front of my friends." The words cut harder than they should have. I froze, standing there with a plate of food I hadn't even touched yet. Around me, everyone kept laughing, passing trays of cinnamon rolls and pouring coffee like nothing happened. But my girlfriend, my own girlfriend, made sure the sentence landed loud enough for the whole table to hear. Her friends smirked. One of them whispered, "Told you." Another gave her a small nod, as if they had been waiting for this moment all along. I looked down at my sweater, plain, maybe a little worn out at the sleeves, and suddenly it felt like proof I didn't belong. She walked ahead without me, sliding into a seat between two guys who weren't even family. They leaned close, asking about her new internship. She laughed like I didn't exist. I stood in the doorway, stuck in place. It wasn't about the brunch. It wasn't about the food, the lights, or the carols playing softly in the background. It was about the fact that the girl I'd spent 3 years with could erase me in front of everyone with one line. Her dad caught my eye for half a second. He shook his head slightly like he pitied me. Her mom just refilled her glass and avoided looking my way. No one spoke up. No one defended me. I took a slow breath and set the plate down on the counter. The pancakes steamed for a second before cooling, untouched. I slipped my hands into my pockets, forcing myself to look calm. Inside, I wanted to disappear. Her laugh carried across the room again, louder this time. She tapped one of the guys on the arm and leaned in to tell him some story. I had never seen her face light up like that for me at brunch. So I did the only thing I could do without losing myself. I walked out the front door. The December air hit hard, cold against my skin. My breath fogged up in the sharp winter wind, but somehow, it felt cleaner out there than it did in that dining room full of fake smiles. I could still hear her voice through the window, muffled but sharp enough to remind me I had been reduced to a joke. Standing by my car, I gripped the keys in my hand. I didn't start the engine. I just leaned against the door and thought about the years I had given, the nights I had worked double shifts to cover bills, the way I believed loyalty meant everything. And for what? For her to treat me like baggage at a holiday table. I stared at the wreath hanging on the front door, its ribbons swaying in the breeze, and asked myself, ever felt more alone in a room full of people you thought were family? I didn't leave right away. I just sat there in my car, staring at the steering wheel like it held the answers I couldn't find inside that house. Christmas brunch was supposed to feel warm, but my chest felt like ice. Through the window, I watched her laugh with the same people she once told me she couldn't stand. She said they were shallow, fake, only cared about who wore what brand. Now she was one of them. And I was standing outside like the guy who never got the invitation in the first place. I kept asking myself if I had missed the signs. Maybe I had been blind on purpose. I remembered the nights she complained about not having enough money for outings with them. I would hand her $40, sometimes $60, telling her not to worry, that I'd cover it. I thought I was helping. Turns out I was funding the lifestyle that made me disposable. The phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from her, "Don't make a scene. Just go home. I'll talk to you later." Not even a sorry. Just an order to disappear. I almost laughed, except there was nothing funny about it. She wasn't asking me to leave, she was telling me. Like I was some problem to quietly erase. My thumb hovered over the reply button, but I didn't type anything. Words didn't matter now. Actions did. I slipped the keys into the ignition but didn't turn it yet. Instead, I thought about the lease we had just signed last month, both our names on it. I thought about the way she begged me to split rent evenly, even though I earned more and usually picked up extra. She said it was about fairness. But now I saw it differently. She wanted independence when it benefited her, and a safety net when it didn't. I started the car finally, the engine humming like it was waiting for my decision. I could drive home, sit in the apartment, and let her come back later with excuses. Or I could do something else. Something quieter, something that would shift the balance without me ever raising my voice. That idea stayed with me as I pulled out of the driveway. Snow dusted the road, soft but steady, and the radio played a carol that didn't match my mood. I drove without thinking, just letting the silence fill the space. By the time I parked in front of our apartment, I knew what I needed to do. Not revenge in the loud way. Not shouting, not arguments. But a kind of revenge she would never see coming. The kind that made her realize I wasn't the fool she thought I was. I sat on the couch in the dim light, staring at the signed lease still pinned on the fridge. Her name and mine side by side. If she wanted her freedom, she'd get it. Just not on my dime. And I wondered, how many people only realize your worth once you stop paying for their comfort? The apartment felt different without her in it. Quiet, almost too quiet, like the walls were waiting for me to admit what I already knew. I walked past the Christmas tree we had set up a week ago. Cheap lights, dollar store ornaments, a star slightly tilted at the top. She had insisted on posting photos of it online, writing captions like, "Our first Christmas together." Looking at it now, the whole thing felt staged. I pulled out the drawer where we kept bills and receipts. My name was on almost everything: utilities, internet, even the streaming services she bragged about using with her friends. Her contribution? Half the rent, and even that came late more than once. I didn't complain then. I thought love meant patience. I sat at the table and opened my laptop. The lease contract was saved in my email. I read it line by line, slower this time, like I was seeing it for the first time. My lawyer cousin once told me, most people don't pay attention until it's too late. But fine print can save you. There it was. A clause about tenancy. If one party decided to terminate their half of the lease and covered the remaining balance, the other had no rights to stay unless they paid their share in full. I leaned back, the chair creaking beneath me. The answer had been sitting there all along. My phone lit up again, her name across the screen. I didn't answer. Instead, I watched it ring out. A few minutes later, another text came, "Don't be dramatic." It was just brunch. Just brunch. That's how she framed it. As if humiliating me in front of everyone was the same as forgetting to pass the salt. I closed my laptop, picked up my jacket, and headed out. There was one more stop to make. At the leasing office, the receptionist barely looked up when I walked in. "Can I help you?" "Yeah," I said, placing the contract on the counter. "I'd like to remove one tenant from this lease. Effective immediately." Her eyes flicked to the paper, then to me. "You understand that means you'll take full responsibility for the rent?" I nodded. "Yes." She typed a few things into her computer, printed out a form, and slid it across the desk. I signed without hesitation. Walking back to my car, a strange calm settled over me. It wasn't about kicking her out. It wasn't even about punishing her. It was about reminding myself that I had choices. That I didn't have to be the guy standing outside in the cold while someone else decided if I was worthy of a seat at the table. Back at the apartment, I unplugged the tree lights and sat in the dark, letting the quiet settle in. Her key would still work tonight. She'd walk in like nothing happened. But this time the place wasn't hers anymore. And I asked myself, what happens when the safety net someone takes for granted disappears overnight? She came home late that night, heels clicking against the hallway floor before the door swung open. Her laugh trailed in first, then silence when she noticed the apartment. No tree lights. No music. Just me, sitting at the kitchen table with papers spread out like cards in a game she didn't know existed. She tossed her coat onto the couch. "Why are you sitting here like that?" I didn't answer right away. I slid the lease across the table toward her. She frowned, scanning it, then looked up. "What is this?" "You're not on it anymore," I said calmly. Her jaw tightened. "That's not funny." "It's not a joke," I replied. "You wanted me to go home today. So I did. This is my home now." She stared at the paper again, her finger tracing the spot where her name used to be. "You can't just." "I can," I cut in. "Clause 3. Tenant buyout." I covered it. Her face shifted, anger first, then something closer to disbelief. "You'd really do this?" Over one comment at brunch. I almost laughed, but not the way she expected. It wasn't one comment. It was every time you made me feel like I was less than you. Today just happened to be loud enough for me to hear it clearly. She paced across the room, hands in her hair, muttering something under her breath. Then she spun back to me. "So what now? You think you're just kicking me out?" I shrugged. "You've got 30 days. That's more than enough." Her phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced at it quickly, then flipped it face down on the counter. I noticed the name that flashed before she did, one of the guys from brunch. My stomach sank, but I didn't react. "Not anymore." "Fine," she said, grabbing her coat again. "If that's how you want it, then don't expect me to fight for this place. Or for us." She slammed the door behind her, the echo rattling the picture frames. I sat back in the chair, staring at the blank spot on the lease where her name used to be. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt like I was breathing again. I thought back to the early days, cheap takeout dinners, long drives just to watch the sunset, promises about building a future together. Somewhere along the way, those promises turned into debts I kept paying while she invested in someone else's approval. And I realized, I wasn't losing her tonight. I had already lost her months ago. Now all I was losing was the illusion. I poured myself a glass of water, took a long sip, and looked around the apartment. It finally felt like mine. But still, a question lingered in my mind as the clock ticked past midnight. How many people only stay because it's convenient, not because it's love? The next morning, sunlight leaked through the blinds, cutting lines across the couch where her coat had been tossed the night before. I sat there with a cup of coffee, no milk, no sugar, just plain the way I'd been drinking it since money got tight. The silence was heavy but clean. For once, no sound of her blow-dryer, no makeup scattered on the counter, no shoes by the door that weren't mine. Her key turned in the lock around 10. She walked in like nothing had happened, holding a paper bag of muffins. "Brought breakfast," she said, forcing a smile. I didn't move. "Don't bother." She set the bag down anyway. "Look, I overreacted yesterday. It was brunch, it was crowded, I didn't want to mix circles. You embarrassed me first by hovering." That word, hovering, sat heavy in the air. I let it pass without a response. She sighed. "Fine. Be mad. But you don't actually expect me to pack up, do you? We have a life here." I pointed toward the fridge, where the updated lease was pinned with a magnet. Her eyes followed. She scoffed, shaking her head. "You're serious." "Dead serious," I said. 30 days. You wanted me invisible. Consider this your wish granted." Her phone rang in her hand. She answered quickly, voice softening in a way it never did for me anymore. "Hey, yeah, I'm here." "No, he's fine. Just stubborn." She turned her back, whispering, but I caught pieces anyway. "I'll come by later. Don't worry. He won't stop me." That was it. The proof I didn't even need but got anyway. She hung up and turned, pretending like I hadn't heard. "It was my boss," she lied. I raised an eyebrow. "Your boss calls you baby?" Her face went pale. She tried to recover, but it was too late. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just grabbed my jacket and keys. "You've got 29 days left. Use them how you want." She followed me to the door. "You can't just shut me out like this. I've given you years of my life." I stopped, hand on the doorknob. "No, you took years." I gave them. I walked out before she could answer. Driving aimlessly, I ended up near the diner where I used to work summers in high school. The same neon sign flickered, half-lit, the same smell of bacon drifting from the kitchen vents. I parked, sat there, and thought about all the times I let her convince me I wasn't enough. Inside my wallet was a crumpled list I once made, goals for the year. Pay off the car. Save $3,000. Visit Colorado. None of them had happened. All because I was too busy funding her comfort. I unfolded it, smoothed it against the dashboard, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like mine again. And I asked myself, what's worse, losing someone or realizing they were never really yours to begin with? I didn't go back to the apartment that night. Instead, I booked a cheap room at a roadside motel, $58 plus tax, cracked wallpaper, buzzing heater, but it was mine. The kind of place people overlook where nobody asks questions. I laid on the thin mattress, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how small freedom can feel at first. Her texts piled up through the evening. "We need to talk." I overreacted. "You're not actually serious about this lease thing, right? Don't ruin Christmas over pride." I read every one. Didn't respond to any. Silence has a weight people don't expect until they feel it pressing down. The next morning I stopped by the bank. I shifted my accounts, moved my savings into a new one under just my name. Every automatic bill tied to us, I cut it off. Internet? Gone. Streaming accounts? Cancelled. Cell phone plan we shared? Split. I didn't do it with anger. Just method. Line by line, I erased her from the map she used me to navigate. When I finally walked back into the apartment 2 days later, her suitcase was half-packed on the floor. Clothes stuffed in without folding, makeup bags tossed on top. She looked up when I entered, eyes red. "You're really doing this?" she said quietly. "I already did," I answered. She picked up a framed photo from the shelf, one of us at the fair last summer. So none of it meant anything? I wanted to tell her it had meant everything to me at the time. That I had believed in us more than I believed in myself. But saying that now would only sound like begging. Instead I shrugged. "It stopped meaning something when you stopped respecting me." Her hands shook as she set the frame down. "You'll regret this." "No," I said simply. "I regret staying this long." She didn't reply. Just zipped the suitcase and dragged it toward the door. The sound of the wheels scraping across the floor was louder than anything else in the room. When the door shut behind her, I sat down on the couch. The silence felt different this time. Not heavy. Not empty. Just mine. That night I cooked pasta for one. I ate slow, no phone on the table, no background noise. It wasn't celebration, it was survival. But it was real. Later I opened my laptop again. The goals list was still folded in my wallet, but now I typed them into a new document. I added a few more. Start a side hustle, clear old debts, take that Colorado trip before the year ended. Each line felt like taking back ground I had given up. And as I closed the laptop, leaning back against the chair, one question kept circling in my head. Why do we wait until we're broken to start building ourselves again? The days that followed felt like winter in more ways than one. The air outside was sharp, but the space inside the apartment was sharper. Bare walls where her photos once hung, empty drawers where her things used to be. I didn't fill them. I wanted to see the emptiness for what it was, proof that I had room to start over. She texted less often now. When she did, it was always short, clipped. "You'll regret this," or "Don't think you're better than me." The last message read, "You'll never find someone who puts up with you the way I did." I almost laughed when I read that one. Put up with me? I had carried her through unpaid bills, late rent, favors she promised to return but never did. If anything, I had put up with her, and worse, I had convinced myself that was love. Work was different too. I showed up early, stayed late, not because I had to, but because it felt good to pour into something that might actually give back. My boss noticed. "Haven't seen this much fire in you since you started," he said, patting me on the back. One night after work, I walked past a coffee shop I hadn't been to in years. The same one where I'd first met her. I stopped at the window watching strangers sip lattes, couples leaning close across tables. For a second I almost stepped inside. Then I realized, I didn't need to retrace old steps. My future wasn't in places that reminded me of her. Instead, I went home, opened that goal list again and started crossing things off. First line, pay off the car. Done. Second, save $3,000. Not yet, but I had a plan. For the first time in months, the numbers in my account were climbing, not shrinking. A week later, I found myself back at the leasing office, not to cancel anything but to ask about renewing early. The receptionist smiled when she saw me. "Most people don't bother until the last minute," she said. "I don't like last minutes anymore," I replied. Walking out, I realized something had shifted. This wasn't about her anymore. It wasn't even about revenge, not really. It was about reclaiming the pieces of me I had let someone else hold. That evening, I got another text from her. "I saw you renewed." "So that's it then?" I typed back for the first time in weeks. That's it. No argument. No apology. Just finality. I sat by the window afterward, watching the snow fall under the streetlights, soft and steady. I thought about how endings don't always crash. They can arrive quietly, like snow covering everything you once recognized. And I asked myself, isn't closure just learning to stop answering doors that never led anywhere? The new year came quietly. No parties, no countdowns. Just me, a glass of water on the table, and the sound of fireworks faint in the distance. I didn't feel lonely. For the first time in a long while, I felt steady. The apartment looked different now. I'd rearranged the furniture, donated what I didn't need, even sold the couch she once insisted we buy on credit. With that money, I cleared the last of my old debt. Every corner of the place reflected something I had chosen, not something I had settled for. A letter came in the mail mid-January. Her handwriting on the envelope. I opened it slowly, half curious. "I don't know why you had to end things the way you did. I know I hurt you, but you didn't have to embarrass me by making me move back home. Everyone's been asking questions. You could have handled it differently. I hope you're happy." No apology. Just blame wrapped in excuses. I folded the letter once, then slid it back into the envelope. Not to keep it, but to remind myself what I wasn't returning to. At work, they offered me overtime. I took it. Each paycheck was another step closer to the life I'd written on that list. I booked the Colorado trip I'd once only daydreamed about. When I clicked confirm reservation, I smiled. It wasn't about the mountains or the views, it was about knowing I could do it on my own. Weeks later, I walked past the same diner again, the neon sign still buzzing. I went inside this time. Ordered coffee, black, and a slice of pie. The waitress smiled when I tipped a little extra. I realized I hadn't thought about her all day until that moment. She was no longer the center of my story, just a chapter one had closed. As winter began to fade, the apartment finally felt warm without her. Not because of who was in it, but because of who wasn't. And one night, standing by the window, I saw a message pop up on my phone. "Can we talk?" I didn't reply. I didn't delete it either. I just let it sit there, a silent reminder of a road I had already walked to its end. The lights from the street cast long shadows across the floor, but for once I wasn't standing in them. I had moved out of them. Poetic justice didn't come from revenge, or making her feel what I felt. It came from taking back my life, piece by piece, and realizing it was never hers to keep. I closed the blinds, sat on the couch, and exhaled deeply. This time the silence wasn't empty. It was peace.